Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid Butt, and we are in the newsroom. Today is the 29th of May 2024, and these are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin with the budget preparation and the expectations as far as the budget 2024-2025 is concerned. There have been a lot of meetings before this budget. They have been between the political parties. There was one that was held in Lahore with our finance minister giving some details on what we should expect. And the fact is that there are a lot of expectations from the public, as is the norm every year around the budget. There are different challenges that our economy is facing as well, and of course with the lender agreement that we want to obtain with the IMF, there are also certain preconditions that we have to adhere to as far as the budget is concerned. This said, the budget needs to be balanced and of course putting into account the current and development expenditures of the federal government, or whether it be the revenues, the capital, the external receipts, and so on and so forth. And also all the different challenges, how can be accumulated within this budget in order to make it a people-friendly budget. We call it a people-friendly budget, but we'll know in the coming days what will be the basic specificities of this balance when it is of course announced in the beginning of this month. This is going to be our first segment, preparation for this budget. What are the expectations and what could the government do as far as budget is concerned? I'm saying could because I do not know what will happen in the budget, but of course we can discuss the different specificities around Pakistan's economy with that. We'll be talking about future pandemic response in our second segment, ladies and gentlemen. And of course we all know what happened with COVID-19. We know how the world was not prepared, and then it took a long time for the vaccines to come out as well. And this has given rise to a demand by important international organizations, including the World Health Organization as well and the United Nations, to prepare a methodology to prepare all the world for future pandemics. Western countries led by the US, France and Germany are pushing for a deal to bolster this pandemic response rules at its major World Health Organization meeting that was held yesterday after states failed to finalize a pandemic treaty. Negotiations on both sides of the reforms are going to resume in a new combined format today, with the assembly due to conclude on the 1st of June. Let's hope a certain mechanism is evolved before it's too late, and in the month of June as well, so that the countries know where to go and how to move forward when it comes to any pandemic. And we never know when a pandemic might hit the world. Then we are going to talk about the International Peacekeeping Day. The International Day of UN Peacekeepers is being observed today to highlight the role of UN peacekeeping forces for world peace. The theme this year is Fit for the Future, Building Better Together. Pakistan's contribution as far as United Nations peacekeeping are a testament to its commitment to international peace and security. Of course, Pakistani peacekeepers, as they have done always in the past, will continue towards the uplift of local communities in troubled regions, and that has also been said by our Prime Minister as well as the statement by the ISPR. Then we are going to talk about Venus, the planet Venus, ladies and gentlemen, that is appearing to be more volcanically alive or active than previously known, according to scientists whose new analysis of decades-old radar images has now spotted evidence of eruptions at 2 additional sites. They already knew there was some eruptions at some site, and that is why it was known as a volcanic planet. But now they say that volcanic activity in this planet has increased and is more prominent than previously thought of. And this is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns the budget preparation. What are the expectations as far as budget 2024-2025 is concerned? We all are looking forward to it. Let's see what happens. There are a lot of expectations, but there are a lot of realities that the government also has to conform to. We've been joined by 2 guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we've been joined by Dr. Khalid. He is an economist. Dr. Saab, welcome to our show. And of course, in the studios, we've been joined by Dr. Niaz Murtaza. He's a political economist. Niaz, thank you very much to have joined us. Let's begin with you, Khalid. Federal budget, 2023-24 growth rate was hardly 3%, the lowest ever in 77 years. The fiscal deficit between income and expenditure in that year is one of the highest fiscal deficits, that is 6 to 7% of the GDP. What measures need to be taken in your point of view in the upcoming budget to improve on that?
Well, first thing first, this budget would be a platform, would be foundation for next IMF program. So in that regard, it is very important, vital for Pakistan's economy. We need to sort of have structural sort of initiative that we want to continue under the funds program. So in that regard, in that context, structural measures would be there. expenditure side measures, revenue collection measures, and it would be a more growth oriented sort of thing. Growth not in a typical Pakistani sense where it is consumptive led or consumption led growth. It would be more industry led growth, more inclusive sort of thing. And one thing more that I expect is that it should be there should be more targeted sort of subsidies instead of blanket subsidies in the budget. So in that context, with linking it with IMF's program, upcoming program, this budget would be very important for Pakistan's economy. Second, what IMF requiring from Pakistan is that we are in a sort of a do or die situation. If we do not reform our economy, that would be not helpful for Pakistan's economy, but it would be a very far cry sort of thing, very difficult sort of thing for especially for taxpayers, especially for the middle income groups. So at the same time, we need to come up with some sort of social protection program where we can introduce specific target sort of interventions so that we can take two-part goal, that is have industrial growth, at the same time have inclusive growth as well, so that disparities or income inequalities, they reduce. At the same time, we grow in terms of industry, in terms of manufacturing. That would be great for Pakistan. But again, it should be an industry-led growth, export-led growth, and this budget should sort of complement these two things, and with a focus of an effective sort of social protection program.
Okay. Focus on effective social programs. Dr. Niaz, a lot of expectations, a lot of realities that have to be met with, and of course one of those realities is the IMF program. An earlier IMF statement had noted that the Pakistani authorities plan to continue strengthening public finances to reduce vulnerabilities by improving domestic revenue mobilization through fairer taxation while scaling up spending for human capital, social protection and climate resilience. What methodology could or should be applied in your point of view to strengthen public finances through fairer taxation in the budget? Secondly, there are many questions in this, and I'm all pointing them out to you. How can we generate income and cut down on expenditures to reduce budget deficits? This is my second question. My third question is, how can we bring about these fine fiscal policies, like for example broadening the tax base without imposing any new tax or increasing the rate of the existing taxes and improving the tax to GDP ratio? A lot of challenges, a lot of questions, and I point them all towards you.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. As you mentioned, we are about to enter an IMF program, but the situation is slightly different from what it would be, from the past. In the past, it's usually that the economy is in shambles, there's a high degree of macroeconomic destabilization, fiscal deficits are high, current account deficits are high, inflation is high, the currency is falling. Now that's not the situation today, precisely because of the reason that we've already just come out of another IMF program, which was a 9-month standby one. And because of that program, we have already achieved some degree of stabilization. So if you look at, the rupee, it's been stable for several months now. Inflation is actually coming down. The current account deficit is very low, and in some months we've even had surpluses. So it's going to be a slightly different kind of a program, IMF program, or at least it should be, from what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 times that we've gone to IMF in 2008, 2013, 2018, and so on. So I think
the program, apart from this SBA, was the only program that was properly completed by the government, wasn't it? And this, the SBA, this 9 months is the second time that we have completed all formalities as per the IMF, preconditions.
Yeah. So now, the goals for Pakistan should be continue macroeconomic stability, but then also try to pursue responsible growth, which doesn't bust, the twin deficits of current account and fiscal deficit. And then the third goal should be equity, that, whatever growth there is, the most, poor sections of the population should also benefit from it, given the fact that they have been, dealing with, double-digit inflation for the last 4 to 5 years. So keeping all that in mind, the first thing that the budget should do is, make sure that, the fiscal deficit is not high, while at the same time, giving some kind of, policies which lead to some growth. So where can that fiscal space come from? Obviously, the first thing you'd think is, increase taxes, cut your expenditure, but then there is also a third way in the current situation, which is because of the fact that interest rates are so high. So we need to look at, take a hard look at whether interest rates need to be so high, given that, inflation has come down to about 30 to 35%, closer to about 20% now, whereas interest rates have not come down. Now, if you bring interest rates down by 1%, that reduces your fiscal deficit by about 500 billion rupees. So that's the first, thing we should look at, because if you reduce your interest rate, first of all, it will reduce your fiscal deficit, but then it will also, lead to growth, because, the borrowing costs will go down for businesses. So that's the first thing that should be decided with the IMF. What kind of, interest rate cuts are they willing to agree to? Then obviously you also need to look at, increasing your taxes, especially for those segments of the economy which have not been paying proper taxes. So for example, your retail sector, your transport sector, real estate, agriculture, plus there is, a lot of tax evasion even in the other sections. So the important thing is not to overburden those sections.
Dr. Niaz, may I add, apart from the salaried class?
Populations which are already paying a lot of, taxes, so, manufacturing, middle classes. And we need to look at, new sources. And then also we need to cut our expenditure, a lot of, expenses are still going on those ministries and departments which have been devolved to the provinces under the 18th Amendment. So, again, a hard look needs to be taken at that. Then, the subsidies that we are paying on all these state enterprises which are bleeding, for example, PIA, and, some movement has already been taken on that. Then, the circular debt. So I think those are 4 or 5 areas that the government should look at and come up with a program.
And that need to be also included in this budget and proper mechanisms as far as these are concerned. Let's talk about tax, Dr. Saab. I did point out to him, do you feel as far as fiscal policies are concerned, can we broaden the tax base without imposing any new tax or increasing the rate of the existing taxes and improve the tax to GDP ratio? Do you feel direct tax could be enhanced, the indirect tax reduced? How can, in your point of view, this be done, reducing the indirect tax while enhancing the direct tax to trigger investment and support higher economic activity? It's a very tricky, zone. It's a very tricky way to balance things out. But can this happen?
Well, this is a conundrum in Pakistan, that how we can balance this indirect and direct taxes. If we want to increase indirect tax, it should not be in a way that burden the already burdened class, that is the salaried class. Maybe direct taxes can be increased by introducing enhancing tax base, not increasing the tax rate. Whenever you increase the tax rate, it sort of overburdened the already burdened. There is a Laffer curve phenomena in economics which say that when tax rate increases, the revenue increases, but at the certain time when it sort of crosses that limit, the revenue starts to decline. So we need to find that sweet spot, and then we need to sort of broaden the tax base. In that way, we can sort of find this balancing thing between indirect taxes and direct taxes. One more thing, burdening in the economy with indirect taxes, that might not be good for industrial growth. So we need to sort of think about what are the right choices to go in another IMF program or for the longer horizon for Pakistan's economy, because Pakistan's future is with broader manufacturing growth, broader industrial growth, because we have been experiencing this turmoil in industrial sector. We need to sort of correct this phenomena and make our economy and a productive economy from a consumptive economy. Because if you see the historical trend, you will see that we sort of took a quantum leap from agriculture sector to services sector directly, which should not be happen if you are following the theoretical economics or the convergence path of developed countries. That should be agriculture and then manufacturing, industrial sector, and then at the high mass consumption are the services sector. So we need to sort of make this balance between indirect taxes, direct taxes, tax policy in such a way that complement industrial growth in Pakistan and make a vibrant, productive middle class in the country that can be the engine of economic growth.
All right. Your specialty is the energy sector, Dr. Saab. Do you, the Minister for Finance, some time back, while talking about different kind of reforms in a pre-budget meeting, talked about energy reforms as well. He said there were leakages, stressed on the need to stopping theft. He said that changes were being brought to the board of distribution companies, the discos as well, in order to bring those from the private sector for better corporate governance. How do you see measures like these? Will we be seeing such measures also incorporated in budget 2024-2025?
Budget may be a different sort of thing, but it should be part of a broader reform agenda under the funds program, because IMF is propagating to bring more competitive, more efficient distribution companies, particularly for power sector. Maybe in budget there would be some sort of measure that can be introduced to curtail these theft issues on recovery of billing. But again, we need to sort of restructure our power sector in such a way that there is more competitive, more efficient distribution companies which can compete with each other and introduce innovative sort of tariff schemes so that we can sort of get rid of this uniform national tariff which cause us billions and billions dollars in terms of subsidies. So that could be a very first step in a right direction to restructure our power sector towards a more liberalized, more competitive, more financially stable power sector. If you sort of explore the link between macroeconomic indicators and power sector, you will see that our power tariff is directly connected with macroeconomic indicators like exchange rate, like interest rate, like CPI, inflation. When they goes up, the capacity charges they go up, and when capacity charges go up, the inflation also goes up. So this is a vicious cycle. We need to sort of break this vicious cycle and make it a positive cycle in a way that electricity sector is causing industrial growth, making it more productive, and we sort of curbing these electricity theft and making it more stable. But it would require some sort of drastic measures, reforms, structural kind of reforms, particularly from distribution companies. And you are right about the corporate principles. Corporate principles are, introduce positions like chief financial officer, chief sustainability officers in the distribution sector of power sector, so that the investments they make, they have a longer horizon, long-term sort of decisions, and they think about sustainability, affordability, and efficiency at the same time.
All right. Dr. Niaz, coming to you, in your point of view, what can be done as far as the social sector development is concerned? This is what you, doctors have also pointed about, like for example, human resource development, education, health, skill development, the information technology sector, the IT sector. And speaking of IT, I'm coupling up it with another question. How important is it for Pakistan to promote service exports, particularly IT and IT-enabled services, in your point of view?
Well, yes, I think those are the big challenges, how to increase our exports, because, our current account deficit is linked to that. And certainly, IT is, a low-hanging fruit, given that, India has been able to make so much, progress in that. And certainly, Pakistan also has the same kind of, capacity. So certainly, IT should be a priority. But then, we need to also go beyond IT as well, because IT will, bring you export revenues, but then it doesn't create so many jobs, especially for, lower income people. So that's what we also need to look at, how to, increase, expand exports in the manufacturing sector. especially through small and medium enterprises, so that there is a trickle down, faster trickle down effect to the lower classes, and
These
then
will be
also
incorporated in this budget, Dr. Niaz. Do you feel that they will be given certain advantages or concessions so that they can improve and also strengthen Pakistan's economy?
Yes, I think that would be important, a strong strategy for, small and medium enterprises, even micro enterprises. That is very important for Pakistan at this stage, so that, there's employment created for the people. And beyond that, there also need to be, social safety nets, because, inflation has been so high for the last 5 years, and for the last at least 2 years, I haven't seen. There was a time when we gave a lot of cash transfers when inflation was going high, but for the several last 1 or 2 years, there haven't been those kind of schemes. So I think it would be important to include cash distribution for the poorest families, so that they can cope. It's good that inflation is going down, but it's still very high. So I think that is also going to be very important. And I think then also so much of it is going to depend on external factors. What are going to be the oil prices? What is going to be the exchange rate? Because if the exchange rate again starts to fluctuate, that will result in increase in oil prices and utility prices, everything. So managing the exchange rate would also be a big challenge. There will be money coming from IMF.
Dr. Niaz, I'm going to cut you short. I'm going to go to my guest, and then I'm going to come back to you. Dr. Khalid, Waleed, my last question to you concerns the National E-Commerce Council that yesterday decided to develop a 5-year roadmap and action plan to promote digital trade. I'd like to have a concise response of whether we will be seeing measures to develop e-commerce in the upcoming budget in the wake of this 5-year roadmap that is being developed.
We should. I mean, e-commerce is the future. We need to sort of understand the changing dynamics of world trade. It is one going clean towards greener sort of thing, greener energy and renewable energy, greener trade. And second, it is going towards e-commerce. So we need to sort of send a positive signal through our budget so that we can sort of cultivate this culture of e-commerce entrepreneurship in Pakistan, and that can sort of bring foreign exchange inflows in Pakistan as well, and keeping the youth bulge in mind, where 60% of the population is youth, and we have a vibrant youth graduating from our universities, and there is not many industries or manufacturing sector where they can get employed. So e-commerce would give them a very good chance to cultivate this youth-led entrepreneurship in Pakistan, powered by e-commerce. So this budget should give positive signals to the market so that we can sort of have this thing. And this e-commerce council is a very good idea. Maybe in that way we can sort of institutionalize these innovative and new sort of things in our economy, in our frameworks, policy arenas. So it's a good thing for Pakistan. Second thing, we need to sort of make it more diverse, more vibrant. If you see this e-commerce sort of landscape, it is sort of limited to few sectors. We need to broaden it to reap its full benefits. So in that way, we can sort of make our economy aligned with world expectations and what world expects from us. So, yeah.
All right. Let's see what happens. The budget is just a few days away. Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid, Waleed, to have joined us. Coming back to you, and my last question to you, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, is twofold. The first concerns the Secretary Commerce, Suale Ahmed Faruqi, who has introduced an upcoming export readiness program that aims to train and counsel small businesses to expand their export markets. And it is believed that this measure is going to enhance Pakistan's export capabilities. This said, I will refer to another comment made by our finance minister recently, who says that the government's work was to make policy that have to be implemented mainly by the private sector. We talk a lot about public partnership. Do you feel this budget could be friendly towards enhancing that public-private partnership, putting into point the export readiness program?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all these Asian tigers, that's what they had, public-private partnerships where, the state helped the private sector break into new export markets which they would not have been able to do on their own. And how did the state do it? It gave them, tax breaks, it gave them, concessions on duties, it gave them, knowledge, technology, information about, foreign markets, and so on. So that is the kind of, role that the state in Pakistan also has to play, because the private sector in Pakistan is quite weak, and on its own it's unable to break into new kind of markets. It's again the same kind of textile, and then there is this small export sector in Sialkot, which is a little different in terms of sports goods and surgical instruments. So that should be the model, the way Sialkot came up. We need to branch out into more and more industries, and that's where we have to have very good understanding of the global economy. What are the new opportunities that are opening up, whether it's in the Gulf, Europe, North America, East Asia, where Pakistan can become an exporter. And that's where help from China would be very helpful, because it's been very good at setting up these export promotion bureaus. So if there's a second round of CPEC, and there is some activity with Mr. Hasan Iqbal going, Mr. Akhtar going, and now the Prime Minister will also go. So if they can revitalize CPEC, and especially the export promotion zone, then I think that will be very helpful for Pakistan.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, political economist, who have joined us to have talked to us about the expectations that a lot of people have, a lot of communities have, the private sector has, as far as the upcoming budget is concerned. And this is just a series of discussions that will continue in the coming days as well, before the budget, of course, during the budget, and post-budget as well, in order to ascertain the economic challenges that Pakistan is facing with, and how to move forward under the current circumstances, in order to also remain in a strong position vis-a-vis the IMF. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns future pandemic response. We all saw COVID and how it impacted the world for 2+ years, how it started and how the world was not ready for that kind of a pandemic, I should say, or it's that kind of a number of people who were affected by this COVID-19, and how the whole world was grappling economically as a result of COVID-19. Therefore, there has been a lot of concern specifically within the World Health Organization, the United Nations, in order to bring aboard a mechanism that could be fruitful for all the countries of the world, developed and developing alike, in order to pursue a mechanism that could make them how should I say, able to adhere to or confront all future challenges, all future pandemics with equal ease. Now there are a lot of discussions as we speak. Western countries, US, France and Germany are pushing for a deal to boost this pandemic response. There are some who are not in agreement with certain policy. There are other African countries that have certain reservations as well. These negotiations are going to resume today. And of course, these are under the auspices of the World Health Organization, and the Assembly is going to conclude on the 1st of June. We've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. On my very right is Dr. Hasan Orooj. He's a public health expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Hasan, to have joined us. And our second guest is Dr. Saeed Akhtar. He's a former president and CEO of PKLI. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us as well. I'll begin with Dr. Hasan. Dr. Hasan, we look at France, US, Germany, who are pushing for a deal to kind of better the whole pandemic response rules at this major WHO meeting that happened yesterday. It will continue today, and of course on the 1st of June will conclude. No agreement or treaty has been agreed to as we speak. There are many issues that developing countries has vis-a-vis what the developed countries has, and there is a lot of miscommunication. I don't know whether it's miscommunication or not, or misadherence to how to move forward under the current circumstances. In your point of view, how important is it to reach this deal at the earliest to be better prepared for any or all future pandemic?
Thank you very much for bringing me on board. We have already seen a huge pandemic of COVID-19, which has killed millions and millions of people, and mortality and morbidity. I mean, people have been diseased. The life was literally paralyzed, not in the developing nations, but also entire world. Economies have been affected. So I think this is very vital for the world to address this issue, and from the forum of WHO particularly, which is an international forum for policy, supervision, action and strategies to be decided for the next 2 or 3 years in the entire world, in all the continents, in all the regions. Besides, there is a major issue of equity. We have lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic that some of the nations, like in Africa, hardly 33% of the population was vaccinated, whereas some of the Western countries have surplus vaccines with them. These are certain issues, an imbalance of resources, capacities, capabilities. These have to be addressed either through a very solid agreement through this forum, which is going on right now. The next meeting is on 1st of June, or through health diplomacy. I would say health diplomacy has a big room and big role to play here.
All right. Speaking as far as health diplomacy is concerned, when you look at this meeting that is going on, there are certain reservations that certain countries have that are, as compared to the developed nations. I think both have certain commonalities and certain points that are, they do not adhere to as far as both the sides are concerned. Now, this parallel deal on updates to existing legally binding health rules, there is a parallel deal also that is being talked about, and that is the international health regulations that includes a new tiered alert system for global health emergencies. A lot of countries says this could be within reach, maybe not what is being discussed at the moot under the WHO, but this IHR could be within reach. Could this parallel deal be accepted by all parties in your point of view?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, we have to understand that one of the biggest lessons that we learned from this pandemic was that the rich countries cannot get away by not helping poor people, because eventually it's going to haunt them. World has become a small village. The travel, the communication. Like for example, take United States. It's safe because there's oceans between, so nobody can attack them. But they have realized recently with this pandemic that the health threat is a very vital threat to their existence. So I think the whole world has realized that ignoring the poor or less developed countries and just protecting yourself, you're not safe, because one person travels and there you go, there's an explosion of the disease. So this IHR thing is not a new thing. The IHR was promulgated in 1969 and then it was revised in 2005.
But was it implemented in Latin?
Well, that's the whole question, and I think in this entire scenario, the rich nations have actually failed to do their responsibility, which is to take the people along. And so you can't just live in a shell and think that since you are safe, let them go to hell. It doesn't work. True. Because nature is very ruthless. It's going to haunt you eventually, and that's exactly what has happened, as we saw in this pandemic, that things started in China, and then very soon the entire
world went all
world
the way to Africa,
and then went into Africa and whatnot. And similarly, when the Congo Crimean hemorrhagic fever kind of a thing started with Africa, and then now we have epidemics all over the world. So again, the global health security is as vital a topic and as serious a topic as talking about containing the nukes or nuclear bombs,
but Dr. Saeed, the fact is that there are certain priorities in the bigger countries of the world, and maybe, I'm not saying certainly, but maybe health is not that much of a priority, or maybe pandemics aren't that much of a priority as far as other aspects of politics or diplomacy.
But I think pandemic has taught them a lesson.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. Dr. Hasan, Orooj, some of the African countries, to counter what they saw during the COVID era, are seeking a new system that could reserve or would reserve at least 20% of tests, treatments and vaccines for poorer countries, among other major reforms in the event of another pandemic. Can such a system be adopted?
Yes, but can I add something?
Please go
what
ahead.
Dr. Saeed has said, I would just try to reinforce that. IHR, International Health Regulation, is a beautiful document, but it's a peacetime document. COVID-19 and pandemic is a war-like situation. It's not peace. It's disaster, it's emergency, and by definition, disaster is a situation where the capacity of the nations and the countries and the regions is not enough to overcome the emergency situation. That becomes a disaster. So IHRA is a document which details about the lab level, about the healthcare systems, about the traveling, but pandemics are an emergency situation. We have to understand that. And coming down to your point, I think it's very wise. And one of the proposals which has been given in the present meeting agreement, which held about a day back, and the next meeting was on 1st of June, was that 20% of all the resources will be in the pool of WHO.
Okay.
And WHO from those resources will allocate further to the Africans, to African nations or the South Asian nations, the third world or developing world. That's also a point of disagreement, by the way, according to my information, between the among the members of the agreement committee, which are not coming to an agreement. And mainly the US and the UK have certain reservations on what has been proposed.
But you know, the fact is, Dr. Hasan, we need to come to a conclusion before it's way too late, before the next pandemic hits, because once you know all of this is ready to, it needs to be implemented, and even the implementation phase is somehow always longer than the whole discussion phase and the adhering to and agreeing to phase.
Very right. I mean, not only conclusion, you have already said we have to then build the capacities of the nations.
Because we don't know when the next pandemic is going to hit.
At a very grassroots level, we have to build the capacity because it is the COVID-19 has also given us a very good lesson. It's the primary health care at the community level, not the ventilators, not the hi-fi hospitals. So you have to have the health education. A simple 10 rupee mask saves lives rather than millions of dollars of spending into a tertiary healthcare setup. But that one
that needs to be streamlined.
Yes, that has to be streamlined, and changing attitudes of the people. That's a very hard task.
That is an extremely hard task. I agree with you on that. Let's talk about important decisions taken, Dr. Saeed. The 9th Trilateral Summit is held just 2 days back, and a decision is taken, a joint statement is taken out on future pandemic prevention, preparation and response between China, Japan and the Republic of Korea. I have the whole joint statement in front of me, and it's a very interesting and important statement. How do you view that? You know, don't you feel certain countries are moving ahead of the other major countries of the world as far as preparedness for future pandemics is concerned?
So I think this pandemic has really taught us a lot of lessons. Preparing for a pandemic is half the fight, if you're prepared.
Agreed.
And I think we also saw a beautiful lesson that countries like, for example, Saudi Arabia put in place all the measures when the Middle Eastern respiratory virus hit the Middle East. So they were a little bit more prepared. So I think countries like Japan, Korea and China, they have understood that if they don't hold their hands with each other and if they don't stand together, nobody can. This is not an individual country situation. This is the regional. So right now I think this is just a regional thing, but this is not going to stay regional. This has to spread global, because again, you can't contain epidemics into a region.
I know. This
one
cannot
has
be contained.
It cannot be contained.
To contain.
Right. But at least I think what they're doing is they're developing joint strategies, joint protocols, the ways to alert systems, preparedness, etc., etc. So I think they are heading in the right direction, and I think people like us who are very, very ill prepared, like Dr. Hasan was saying, that we really have to supplement or enhance our epidemic intelligence services, centers that report the system, a central repository kind of a thing, and a whole mechanism of preparation for the epidemic.
But I understand its preparation, but I'm just saying that certain countries like the Republic of Korea, Japan and China are moving ahead much quicker than other nations. I think that's a step in the right direction, and maybe these countries will take some kind of a lesson from the speed with which they have come forward with that. Dr. Hasan, the biggest risk, as we have seen recently, comes from pathogens that circulate in animals and then jump into humans. The WHO identifies several priority diseases with pandemic potential: Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, Ebola, Marburg, Lassa fever, MERS, SARS, Nipah virus infection and Zika. But there are some pathogens with pandemic potential that are circulating in animals that we do not know about, and that is of course why we talk of future pandemics. How crucial in your point of view is it to identify hotspots where animals and humans come into contact and take steps to reduce risk across the world, whether it be in Pakistan or in Antarctica? For example, hygiene standards at markets where animals are slaughtered and sold could be more closely regulated. What other measures do you feel could be taken in that context?
A very scientific question. This is in scientific term known as high risk mapping. What we do is, whatever the situation is, if you know your enemy and the place of enemy, it will be very easy for you to, like people praise about Pakistan's response towards COVID. One of the major reasons was that we have done quite a bit of homework. They were not absolute ban on and lockdowns everywhere, only the lockdowns in the specific places, because we have done high risk mapping. Where only the COVID-19 patient was present, that street or a couple of streets next to them were locked down and the rest was not. Likewise, when you are going to prevent a disease, you must know where the reservoir is, whether it is in Africa or Asia. It's the same methodology as in polio. We know the reservoirs of polio is in the KPK and some Balochistan, and where the environmental samples are positive. Likewise in dengue. So the principle is the same for any pandemic. If we know that and not only for the disease or the virus, we should also know the weaknesses. The high-risk mapping for the weaknesses.
I agree.
Where the lab is,
I agree with you.
where the diagnostics are, where the human resources, where the hospitals are prepared to receive the patients. But the most important is the presence of virus, rightly said, where is the prevalence. For example, Nipah virus was very prevalent in India a couple of months back, but not in Pakistan with the grace of Allah. Likewise, dengue we have common, and this gives us the lead towards health diplomacy, that there are no borders. We have to think of forgetting our differences and come to a table for at least health issue.
Exactly.
And discuss that.
I agree with you on that. Dr. Saeed, manufacturing of vaccines, therapeutics needs to be spread more equitably with regional hubs ready to mass produce high quality medical products. We've seen that in COVID, how there was a delay before the vaccines arrived in certain parts of the world. We were fortunate in Pakistan to have that earlier. There were countries that did not even get it since till a few months afterwards. Do you think building local manufacturing capacity by waiving intellectual property rights, building factories, training people to work in them, often in low resource settings with participation of the private sector and the public sector, given its role in vaccine research, production and distribution, is important to also combat future pandemics, so that we can prepare the vaccines in time and distribute them to the people?
So I would agree with that one, but let me just go back to your first question, which is, I want to make a very important comment. Humans and animals have lived together for years, but now humans are trespassing on the property of the animals, and that's where a lot of animals are displaced, and a lot of these epidemics and pandemics start when the humans start to bother the habitats of the animals, and I think we need to think about it and we need to stop that. Coming back to the production of virus, absolutely yes, we need to start our own manufacturing, but we cannot...
Not just Pakistan, I'm talking of everywhere in the world.
But we cannot violate the intellectual property right. We have to still honor the intellectual property right, and yet develop our resources locally in a way, because in this day and age you can't violate the international
That
priority.
is, I agree with you on
Yeah.
that. We are a bit short of time, so thank you very much to my two guests, Dr. Hasan Orooj, public health expert, and of course Dr. Saeed Akhtar, former President, CEO of PKLI, and Chairman, Board of Governors of PKLI as well. Thank you very much to the both of you, our eminent guests, and I hope to bring you more often to talk about health, because I think it is a priority and should be a priority for any government, including ours. Let's come to our last two stories, ladies and gentlemen, very, very quickly. The first is the International Peacekeeping Day. The International Day of UN Peacekeeping is being observed today to highlight the role of UN peacekeeping forces for world peace. The theme this year is Fit for the Future, Building Better Together. Pakistan's contribution, we all know, as far as the United Nations peacekeeping is concerned, it is a testament to its commitment to international peace and security. 171 Pakistani soldiers, including 27 officers, have sacrificed their precious lives for the restoration of global peace, and that has been acknowledged by the United Nations as well. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, Venus, the planet Venus, appears to be more volcanically active than it was previously known, according to scientists whose analysis of new radar imaging that has been collected over the decades shows that there are two more points where volcanic eruptions have been happening as far as Venus is concerned. So, of course, new discoveries, new revelations, and in the wake of that, new scientific endeavors in order to understand our solar system better. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's news. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to you, us in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.